Adam, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I know we've got a common connection through Derek, and I'm glad to have crossed paths with you in this virtual world. I'm really excited. For those of you that don't know Adam, he is the CEO and founder of Map Holdings. Is also the co-host for Rethink the Financial Advisor podcast. So definitely, will include a link to that. Go ahead and check that out. Before we get into it, he has a really interesting background, but also excited to hear more about Asset Map and what it is today and what the platform is and all that stuff. But I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell me a little bit more about your background, especially this idea from geography to now finance. So over to you.
Well, I think what you're referring to is Asset Map as it is very well known for its visual mapping of a household's finances and all the people and financial decisions that you've made over time to try to build this financial inventory, if you will, visually. And where it gets used, as it was used by me in my financial planning practice for, gosh, now 25 years, was an in-house kind of homegrown technology experience that was really more about the experience of helping clients finally understand all the complexity they were dealing with, and their
Mhm.
advisor, myself, try to figure out how to navigate it. And this comes out of a mapping framework or mapping background that I had actually studied in my undergrad school. I had actually studied what's called geographic information systems, or what you guys all would think about as GIS or GPS, right? When you look at your phone or your car, you see this map evolving of where you are. And it's the same kind of technology of taking data and showing it visually and overlaying it with other aspects that might help you make decisions. So that was parlayed into financial planning when I got into the business. And then it went viral when I showed it in 2012 at a conference, and the rest is history. Now, thousands of advisors, millions of people have experienced this already, and it's really quite amazing how far it's come.
Can you share a little bit more about that, how that took flight? I mean, so you shared it at a conference.
Hmm.
Like, what was it? Was it people just sort of started talking about it, wanted to learn more? How can I get a hold of it? How did it
Yeah.
kind of go from like concept to presentation to then, I mean, where it is now?
Well, it depends how far back you want to go. In 2002, believe it or not, I actually drew this out. I was in business school at night at the time, and I said, I need to find a way to understand the complexity that I'm dealing with in these households, because
Yeah,
I was a very visual type of person. I was very interested in graphics
right.
at the time. And so I actually built this and got it compliance approved in 2006.
Oh,
And
that's a
in
big
2000,
milestone. Yes.
yeah, it took me quite a while to get the compliance departments of my broker dealer to really say I could use this with consumers. But
Right.
once I did, I tripled my productivity in my
Holy smokes.
first year, and then I tripled it again, and then I tripled it again. So by the time I got to the third year of using this in the field, I had obviously made a significant increase in revenue generation. That was mostly AUM, life insurance at the time,
Yep.
estate planning, corporate stuff. And started getting notices, and I realized I had to build the technology to support it. It was just taking over my life. And that's what I did. I founded and started funding without knowing what I was doing, Lauren. Basically, just blowing money into developers where I had no understanding of what I was doing. And I built the first prototypes. And it wasn't in 2012, it was a best practice meeting where
Hmm.
we were all sharing what were our success stories. And it was my turn to share for the top of the producer group in my broker dealer. And everyone said this. They said, hey, I'm doing the same thing on a yellow pad, on a whiteboard, on a napkin. I'm trying to explain what's going on in these trusts relative to the company and the business and the family members. Can I just use your system? And I said, sure, I guess we'll figure it out. You can use it. And that's how it started. And it was 90 advisors by the end of the year, and then it was 300, then it was 500, now it's over 6,000. So
Holy smokes.
it's kind of interesting. It didn't just happen like that, but it happened because I think advisors all recognized that they could be more effective having
Yep.
conversations around the inventory.
Okay, so as someone who has done dozens of development projects,
Mm,
wireframed it, I mean, I've seen it, design, user experience, data, all that stuff. Like, what are you all doing to, because you can get a really sweet,
mm.
working back end, but how have you been doing, testing, user testing and experiences to make sure that people can actually use information smoothly to kind of get it out,
Yeah.
like out product, constantly, tweaking, testing, all of that. What's that process been like? So you can not only
Yeah.
have intelligence, but then you can help it be presented in what you were saying earlier, is that visual way.
It's an interesting question because I think I've had a very strange mashup of skills. I'm a design nutcase. Wanted to be an architect a long time ago,
Yeah.
and then got into finance and realized I was a communicator. I love people. I don't want to work with computers. And here I built a technology platform with the backbone of a lot of other smart people. So I didn't do it on my own. But I think for me, I'm a big zealot for UX or user experience and
Yep.
customer experience. And I very much think and always put myself in the shoes of the recipient of my communication. And I think I apply that to the podcast as well,
Yep.
whether it's tonality influx or whether it's visual, it's controlling the entire experience that you can control
Right.
as much as possible with the goal of making it consumable and not intimidating. And
Right.
that is a really important aspect that I think a lot of financial advisors never got trained on, which is understanding how to deliver information that's typically complex, but something that's digestible so that you actually empower the consumer, not intimidate them. And
Yeah.
that's an important nuance, because I think for most of my history, I kept watching other advisors just say, here's your 80-page financial plan and your 90-page Morningstar. Can't you see what we need to do? And the client's like, I guess I trust you because you look so smart.
Right.
And that was enough, but that's no longer the case, Lauren. We are seeing consumers have a much different expectation of the value proposition, and their attention span is diminished greatly. You need to deliver value. So we came up with this design principle called simple rich, which means everything we generate from our product has to fit on one page, regardless of complexity, and it has to be consumable by the least common denominator,
Uh-huh.
but also give preeminence to the display or the presenter in such a way that they can take it into multiple discussions.
Right.
That's a really challenging mashup.
Yes, that's very challenging. Simple's never easy, let alone to be able to put that sort of complexity on really complex problems, right?
Mhm.
So has that one sheet, I'm assuming, changed over time? How is it kind of, yeah, tell me a little
You
bit more
mean
about
going to
that.
two sheets?
Yeah, right? Or maybe
No,
smaller font. So
no, yeah, right. Well, that's true. Disclosures wind up at 8 point.
yeah, yeah, that's
There's
right, minimum.
that's the legal limit. You can't go below
Right.
8 point. It's funny. The answer is no. Everything we generate must fit on a tear sheet one page. It is a requirement, one that we force ourselves into. But for financial planning, that's really challenging, right? Typical financial planning reports are 10 pages or more.
Yeah.
Mostly it's disclosure language. We figured out actually how to do the math in such a way where we could actually eliminate the reasons for the 9 pages of disclosure. And that was, we actually had to design a planning calculation and display of it where it had enough insight where
Yeah.
a technical person could say, okay, this is not Fisher Price, I can't trust this.
Right.
But to the point where they could actually explain it and go deep. That's I think one of our secret sauces. I think one of the things we've been able to do is, I mean, look, think about most households. Most households are not just one or two people, right?
Right. Right.
They're two kids or three or two and a half kids. It
Right.
might be
Right.
generation above you that you're also taking care of mom and dad.
Right.
You have a business partner. Oh, you have a trust because you had to set up a trust to hold your insurances. Oh, and
Hmm.
then you have a charity. Oh, and you have a company. And then, so the reality is the households are much more complicated than we
Right.
typically think the registrant who has a brokerage account with us. Now, they're making decisions on a whole different scale. And they have on average 25 different financial instruments, everything from income sources to retirement accounts, 401k, benefits at work, a checking account. When you add it all up, it's really complicated. How do you get that onto one page?
Right.
And that was the fact that we were able to pull it off with millions of iterations is, I think, one of the things where we still stand out in this space.
Yeah.
But it certainly wasn't easy to build that architecture.
And is that a customizable one page, or is it pretty kind of default from lessons learned from, I'm assuming, what the data is telling you on your side too?
Well, north is north, south is south, right? You have to have some standards of
Basis. Yep.
right, because what we needed to have it do, and of course, my requirement list is just too large. But thankfully, we had tested it for 10 years in the field to get to a
Right.
place where we said, okay, this is really bespoke and scalable, but
Right.
standardizable. Just like when you look at an X-ray of your body and I look at mine, you can still see they're both skeletons, right?
Right. Right.
And so the person who's diagnosing potentially any, let's say, financial malady can look at the thing and see instantly where the problems are, right? So
Hmm.
the professional had to have some expectation that
Framework.
insurances are going to be in the
Yep.
north and her assets are going to be in the west and his are going to be in the east and their joint assets are going to be south, right? So you know where to look. And that's an
Yep.
important aspect of creating a standardized but fully customizable experience.
Okay, so from advisors then how is it teeing them up then for that further conversation? And how is it helping them, maybe even get to those deeper conversations faster?
There's something that happens, and I love this analogy. So perhaps you can imagine this in your mind. If I wanted some guidance on my wardrobe, I could invite you to come over to my closet, my wardrobe, and we go through my clothes. Now, if you're an expert, you might know how to go about looking at that. Most people will take all of it out, dump it
Right,
on the bed,
right.
and like Marie Kondo, they would say, hold it up and say, do you love this? Does it fit? Do you? No, I don't want. Okay,
Get
say
it,
goodbye.
rid of it. Yep.
Goodbye. And that process can be very cathartic for many people. It could also be maybe revealing or vulnerable.
Hmm.
And because the reality is, most of us haven't gotten any guidance on what are the right financial instruments. We collect a bunch of stuff, usually from employers or from multi-generations, if you have
Right,
wealth in there.
right.
And you set up a bank account, you still have the same bank account you started when you got out of college. Like, the reality is that we hoard a lot of the stuff
Yes.
that
Without
we
even
bought
realizing.
originally. We don't even think about it. It's all
Yeah.
haphazard. So the first process of any level of financial guidance starts with a know your client, KYC, typically called technically, but also there's a suitability process for all advisors that they must go through to prove that they're delivering best interest advice. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
whether you're selling life insurance or doing a full-fledged fee-based financial plan, you got to know the client. So
Mhm.
this process is actually pretty consistent, the fact gathering process. So dumping everything on the bed and deciding what actually should be there and not be there is really important. The same thing is true with finances. If you think about that massive collection of stuff, there are some obvious holes that advisors will see. Hey, I
Mhm.
noticed that you have 3 retirement accounts, but I noticed you don't have any pension. Is that intentional? No, I didn't even know to ask that question. Okay, let me educate you. I see
Yeah,
that you have a bunch of insurances. Why do you have? Well, my cousin sold me all this insurances. Do you know it's not owned correctly and the wrong beneficiary? No, I didn't realize that, because nobody gets to inspect this stuff, Lauren. And when you have somebody who's invited to look at this in a transparent way, high level, no
yeah,
judgment,
right.
actually start teeing up the right conversations to do triage. And
Yeah.
that's the first step of all financial guidance.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, and what you can appreciate too, right, in working with folks that do have complex situations is if you get a 10-page minimum, right, return, I mean, that's a lot to go through. And most people are used to just the executive summary. So it sounds like you're
Yeah.
really having to provide that piece of it in a thoughtful way. Are you all doing any sort of coaching for the advisor side, or is it more like, okay, advisor, we have literally teed you up, like you go and you run with your run
Yeah.
your piece of thing, or is it also like, do you have like prompt questions for advisors or things like that to kind of help them then get to that next step?
That's a great point. We do have such things. And over the years, advisors said, Adam, how do we take your language and
Hmm.
replicate that? It turned out that Asset Map was less of a software as a service, but it
Yeah,
was more of a process as a service. And we had to teach people how to go and do that California closet analogy that I just gave you, which
right,
is, how do we figure out what you should be having and how do we structure this thing?
right.
And so we started with a boot camp that was very popular. Now it's all virtual and people come for 3 days and they learn our language. We also have a digital LMS tool, learning management
Oh,
system, for them to
interesting.
get certified. But I think the most effective thing has been what we call frameworks, where we
Hmm.
teach ways to ask and engage new and important questions that feel very human and very empathetic. For example, I see that you have X, Y, and Z on your asset map. Why
Right.
did you choose to buy that? What did you try to meet, or what was the reasoning behind it? You learn,
Mhm.
by the way, that most of the reasoning is nobody remembers.
Right,
Okay,
right, right.
my uncle told me to buy it. I don't know, right?
Yes, you're helping to resurface that, right?
That's
And so
right.
somebody asking you the question. So yeah.
Exactly. Right. No different than in our, it's a very behavioral type of, I think, approach, but it
Hmm.
enables the advisor to run the same play every time and still seem empathetic and inquisitive, and not
Right,
always be trying to, let me educate you this, to death, how an
right,
IRA works. They're like, why did you do this or not do this? And so
right.
we teach these questions and these frameworks to ask.
Yeah, but that I think that thinking and even calling it frameworks, right? It's if you have that same framework that can be applied, but obviously the results are different because each person's different. So then it gives you this sort of like map to follow, for lack of better words, so that
Yeah,
you can pull them through. Okay,
absolutely.
so I have to ask, I don't know, because it's the thing right now is AI, right?
I've heard of it.
So everyone's talking about AI in different ways, and this is a different way of approaching. I don't even know if I'd call it AI.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts, and do you think that this yeah, do you think there's an intersection here with AI? Where, how do you kind of look at it? Are you guys building tools that are kind of leveraging some of these newer, quote unquote, newer technologies? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, there's lots of different ways to look at the AI conversation. Most people these days are talking about it from the GPT standpoint, right? So this natural language processing that has the capacity potentially to consume large portions of data and make some interesting insights. That executive summary you talked about would seem an obvious potential innovation from asset map, right? Can you
Mhm.
build an asset map and then boom, it can already tell you what you need to do. That
Right,
in a sense does start to, I don't say compete with an advisor, and advisors are our clients. So we tend to focus more on, can I get data into our platform using
right.
AI? And that's where we're spending our time and money. I would offer to you this, Lauren. There's something that's really important that keeps coming up in our industry. You probably have heard it. And there's this whole aspect of what's the role of the human in
Right.
advice delivery, especially as tech continues to creep in and will continue to do so. We know. How does a human advisor provide more and more relevance? And we actually joke that Asset Map supports the original, the OG AI. And that OG is advisor intelligence, AI. And what that means is really there's a component of financial decision making that has really been historically human and we think continue will be. When a decision has to be made that has a high cost of being wrong or
Mhm.
is complex, humans tend to want another human for validation. Am I
Mhm.
making the right decision? Are we okay? As
Mhm.
we go further and further away from, we'll call it a simple, low cost of being wrong problem or challenge, we tend to want this human. And so what we're really trying to tee up with Asset Map is, can I facilitate a high level conversation
Yep.
and get the advisor's intelligence, whether it's legal, tax, insurance, investment, financial planning, banking, whatever that might be, can we apply their logic and their insight and their experience to the client's life in real time
Yep.
using a common framework, which is as demystifying as a map of your finances and who matters?
Yep.
That is the real key. Once you do that, all of a sudden the advisor's role is elevated to its best use and highest revenue producing activity.
It makes sense, right? Because if AI is a tool that can help speed up the process for the clients and the advisors and then they're be able to present it with the more they don't have to kind of go through all the paperwork, like right, the piles of paperwork, what have you. I'm sure there's a degree of that, but it seems like it keeps it more seamless. So
Can we presume that advisor's role, right? That an advisor's role or professional role is to provide the client one thing, and
mm,
that's confidence in the business decision making.
mhm,
That's it. Because nobody can give you a guarantee that the outcome is better, but you want confidence so that you can move off the mark and make a call, make a decision,
that's
invest,
right.
insure, get rid of, right? Buy, don't buy, get out. So the point is that these decisions really are not, because there's no certainty in them. We're just really looking for more confidence. And I think going forward, tools like AI and analysis tools and financial planning tools are all really there to help us make decisions. And I think the
Sure.
key is, how do you get the human to really connect with another human and show that they actually know what's going on and give them perspective?
Yep, yep. Well, I mean, part of leadership is being able to make calculated risk, right? So this is helping to
Yeah,
tee up those decisions so that you can make decisions for your own life. So at the
make
end of the day, if you
decisions.
have a life change, you're not going to go, well, let me go back to my, AI tool to see where I need to turn to next, right? I want to talk with Jane or Brian or whoever it is that you trust, like you can
That's
have
it.
real conversations with. And that human piece, I don't, I put it out there. I don't think you can replace that. So
Well,
it's
it's a great question, though. And I wonder whether we know that answer. Trust is, in fact, the key for the human financial advisor. I do believe that certainly the X and Y generation specifically is showing that they would prefer digital experiences over human ones. The
mhm.
question will be, what's their threshold for when those decisions are too complicated or
Yep.
have such a high cost of being wrong that they really do want a human validation? How they
Mhm.
consume it, whether it's from a fee-based advisor or just their trusted uncle who's rich, or
Right,
whatever
right.
it is, or who their, maybe it's their guru,
Left to be
right?
said. Mhm.
It's going to be interesting to see who they go to for that trusted guidance on decisions they need to make.
Yeah, super interesting. Adam, this is so fun. I love hearing more about just the story of what you've been able to build in this tool.
Thank you.
Very high level. Any other thoughts, things that I haven't asked that you think would be helpful to share?
I think we're all on the precipice of something new. I'm not sure that I know what it's going to be like, but I think over the next 4 to 5 years, what is not going to change is this classic Jeff Bezos' quote goes, as he was asked, what's going to change? What's investable over the next 10 years? And he says, it's not important to know what's going to change. We can't figure that out. The question is what's not going to change. And
Mm.
that is investable. And that's where you want to put your time and your energy. We know what it is for Amazon, right? We can probably all recite that. But for us, and I think the industry in general, Lauren, I think it's all going to be how we connect with our clients and prove that we're adding value beyond the expectation, right? It's
Yep.
always about how do you over deliver and under promise. And I think the question for us in advice is that, is it really about the management of the money? Is it really about the best products we're finding? Or is it really about the confidence that we're giving our clients
Yep.
proactively when they don't ask? That's
Yep.
right. Being on their team and watching the store without being asked.
So well said. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Adam, again for your time. I'm
Certainly.
excited to continue to watch Asset Map and all the things that you all are doing. And yeah, excited to see what comes of it next.
Thank you so much for having me.